There is a specific kind of silence that happens in an arena right before history is made. It isn't the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of 20,000 people holding their breath at the exact same moment. If you were there, or even if you were watching through a screen, you felt the change in atmospheric pressure. The air in the stadium grew heavy, pressing down on the shoulders of the audience like a physical weight. The lights didn't just turn off. It seemed to be swallowed by a creeping, unnatural darkness that started from the rafters and bled down to the ringside barricades. For a long time, nothing happened. This is the mastery of modern storytelling, the weaponization of nothingness. In a world of constant noise, scrolling feeds, and flashing advertisements, the decision to make 20,000 people sit in pitch blackness is a bold, terrifying artistic choice. The commentators stopped speaking. The rustling of popcorn bags ceased. Even the ambient hum of the arena's air conditioning seemed to fade away. Then, the fog machines kicked in. It wasn't the usual thin mist that dissipates in seconds. This was thick, rolling, heavy fog that carpeted the entrance ramp, looking more like a graveyard at midnight than a sports entertainment venue. It curled around the steel posts of the ring, obscuring the floor, turning the familiar battleground into something alien and unknown. The visual storytelling here was precise. It told us that we were no longer in the realm of sport. We had drifted into a nightmare. The anticipation in that room was kinetic. You could practically reach out and touch the anxiety. Everyone knew someone was coming, but the presentation suggested that what was arriving wasn't a wrestler, but a force of nature that had been dormant for too long. And then the sound hit. It wasn't music, not at first. It was a distorted, mechanical screech that sounded like metal tearing underwater, followed immediately by the concussive boom of pyro. But this pyro didn't shoot up into the air in a celebration of joy. The flames erupted outward, aggressive and violent, painting the fog in shades of hellish red and burnt orange. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. For a split second, they gasped. St. It was a collective intake of air that signaled genuine shock. And then, through the wall of fire and smoke, the silhouette appeared. She stood there, completely motionless. The camera work here was brilliant in its restraint, keeping her in shadow, allowing our minds to fill in the terrifying details. She didn't pose. She didn't wave to the fans. She didn't acknowledge the cameras. She simply existed, a dark void in the center of the chaos. This wasn't a return to glory. It was a warning. The way she moved down the ramp was slow, almost predatory, like a shark gliding through deep water. The usual bounce in her step was gone, replaced by a grounded, heavy gait that suggested burden and power. As the lights slowly lifted to reveal her face, the transformation was undeniable. Gone was the polished superstar the fans remembered. In her place was something feral, something unhinged. The makeup was jagged, the eyes wide and unblinking. The screaming of the crowd finally erupted, a deafening roar of recognition mixed with unease. They weren't just happy she was back. They were intimidated. This entrance communicated a singular, terrifying message without a single word being spoken. The person who left this building months ago is dead, and the entity that has returned has no interest in playing by the rules of the past. While the arena was losing its mind, a different kind of drama was unfolding behind the curtain. Imagine the scene in the gorilla position, the nerve center of the production, just feet away from the stage. Usually, this area is a hub of controlled chaos, with producers shouting cues and technicians checking monitors. But in this moment, the mood shifted to genuine bewilderment. The script had called for a return, yes, but the intensity of the performance was something no writer had put on paper. The producers exchanged glances, their headsets buzzing with confusion. The sheer darkness of the character, the lack of pandering to the crowd. The unsettling realism of her thousand-yard stare blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Even the veteran road agents, men and women who have seen everything in this business, stood with their arms crossed, watching the monitors with furrowed brows. They weren't asking if the segment was working. They were wondering if the performer was okay. There was a dangerous magic in method acting, and it felt as though she had dipped too far into the well of her own psyche. The production team scrambled to adjust. Camera angles they had planned didn't fit this new, terrifying vibe. They had to improvise, zooming in tighter on her eyes, cutting away less frequently to the crowd. They realized in real time that they weren't broadcasting a sporting event anymore. They were broadcasting a horror movie. The headset chatter quieted down as the realization hit everyone simultaneously. They had lost control of the narrative. The performer was driving the ship now, steering it into stormier waters than anyone in corporate had approved. It was a moment of artistic rebellion, a refusal to be the commercial product they wanted, choosing instead to be the monster the story needed. Further back in the locker room, the atmosphere was even more complex. The monitor hanging on the wall became the focal point for the entire roster. Wrestlers who were midway through taping up their wrists or lacing their boots stopped cold. The chattering and joking that usually fills the dressing room evaporated. They watched the screen not as fans, but as potential victims. In the ecosystem of professional wrestling, a return of this magnitude shifts the food chain instantly. The current champions, sitting comfortably at the top, felt the ground shake beneath them. There is a palpable jealousy that mixes with fear in moments like this. Every minute of screen time given to this terrifying entrance was a minute taken away from someone else. But beyond the professional anxiety, there was a personal unsettlement. They know her. They travel with her. They share meals and car rides. To see a friend transform so completely into something so cold and menacing is jarring. It raises the question, how much of that darkness was always there, hiding just beneath the surface of the person they thought they knew? The younger talent looked at the screen with wide eyes, realizing the bar had just been raised to an impossible height. The veterans watched with a grim respect, recognizing the toll such a character takes on the mind. The silence in the locker room mirrored the earlier silence in the arena, but it was heavier. It was the silence of soldiers watching anew, an advanced weapon being deployed on the battlefield, knowing that sooner or later they would have to stand across the ring from it. The hierarchy had been dismantled in 3 minutes of television time. The queen was back, but she wasn't looking for a crown. She was looking for blood. By the time this segment aired on the West Coast, the digital world had already caught fire. Social media platforms became a hive mind of speculation and analysis. This is the modern emotional aftermath of a major wrestling event. The experience doesn't end when the show goes off the air. It migrates to the internet, where it mutates and grows. Fans began dissecting every frame of the entrance like forensic investigators at a crime scene. They slowed down the footage, looking for hidden symbols in the video wall graphics. They analyzed the lyrics of the new music, searching for clues about her motivations. The fear she projected was infectious, spreading through timelines and forums. Did you see her eyes? This became the trending question. People weren't talking about championship belts or win-loss records. They were talking about aura. They were talking about the feeling of dread she inspired. The video clips of her walking through the fog garnered millions of views in hours, outpacing mainstream sports highlights and news stories. This proves that emotional storytelling transcends the niche of wrestling. You didn't need to know the backstory to understand the visual language of fear. Conspiracy theories began to sprout. Was this a nod to a past legend? Was she possessed by a storyline entity? The engagement metrics went through the roof, but the tone of the conversation was different. It wasn't the usual toxic arguing. It was a collective, hushed reverence. The fans were united by curiosity. The terrifying nature of the comeback forced everyone to stop scrolling and pay attention. In an economy of attention, she had committed a robbery. She had stolen the focus of the entire wrestling world, not by being the loudest, but by being the most disturbing. The internet, usually a place of noise, was stunned into a fascinated whisper. Why do we love this? Why does a scary comeback resonate more than a heroic one? There is a deep psychological hook in witnessing the descent of a character. We are naturally drawn to the shadow side of human nature. When a hero returns with a smile and high-fives the front row, it feels good, but it feels safe. It confirms that the world is orderly. But when a character returns as a monster, it disrupts that order. It taps into our primal fear of the unknown. And oddly, we find comfort in facing it safely through the screen. This comeback tapped into the dark feminine archetype, a powerful, destructive force that refuses to be polite or accommodating. For the fans, especially those who feel marginalized or angry, seeing a character embrace her inner darkness is incredibly cathartic. It validates their own hidden frustrations. We cheered for her terror because it felt authentic. In a scripted world of polished promos and rehearsed lines, her silent, scary demeanor felt like the only honest thing in the building. The emotional connection here is paradoxical. The more she frightened us, the more we loved her. We wanted to see what she would do next, not because we hoped she would win, but because we feared what she was capable of. It's the same reason we slow down to look at a car crash or watch horror movies through our fingers. The darkness is magnetic. By shedding her good girl image and returning as a nightmare, she gave the audience permission to explore their own shadows. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, proving that fear is often a stronger bond than love. Now, strip away the lights, the fog, and the millions of viewers. Think about the human being underneath the makeup. To pull off a comeback this scary, to maintain that level of surprise, requires a profound and painful isolation. For weeks, perhaps months, she had to disappear. This meant lying to friends, dodging text messages from coworkers, and living like a ghost in her own life. The emotional toll of hiding is heavy. To build this monster, she had to sit alone in hotel rooms, staring at the ceiling, visualizing this moment over and over again until it felt real. The anxiety of the reveal is a crushing weight. What if the fog doesn't work? What if the crowd doesn't react? What if they laugh instead of gasp? A performer puts their entire vulnerability on the line in moments like this. The scary persona is a shield, a suit of armor she welded together to protect herself from the fear of irrelevance. While the world saw a terrifying force of nature, the reality was a woman with a racing heart, standing behind a black curtain, praying that her art would connect. She had to kill her old self to give birth to this new one. That is a grieving process. She had to say goodbye to the merchandise sales, the smiling photo ops, and the easy cheers of the children. She traded adoration for fear. That is a lonely transaction, as she stood in that ring. Looking out at the sea of stunned faces, the adrenaline was surely mixing with a profound sense of solitude. She was the most powerful person in the arena, but also the most distant. The character required her to sever connections, to be cold, to be apart. Imagine being her family watching this from home. Imagine being a parent, a partner, or a child, seeing the person you love transform into a symbol of terror on national television. There is a strange dissonance in seeing the eyes you know so well look so vacant and cruel. They know the soft-spoken woman who drinks tea in the morning and worries about grocery bills. But on that screen, framed by fire and fog, she is a stranger. It is a testament to her skill, but it is also a jarring emotional experience for those closest to her. They see the physical changes, the way she lost weight or gained muscle to look more jagged, the way she dyed her hair to a darker shade. They witness the preparation, the late nights studying old horror films, the mood swings as she tried to get into the headspace of a villain. They bore the brunt of her transformation before the cameras ever rolled. This comeback wasn't just her sacrifice, it was theirs too. They had to support her as she descended into this dark creative place. And when the show ends and the makeup wipes come out, they are the ones who have to help her find her way back to herself. The transition from monster back to human isn't instant. The adrenaline crash after such a high-intensity performance is brutal. Her family watches the TV with a mix of pride and concern, knowing that the world is now afraid of her, and knowing they are the only ones who know the truth. It creates a protective circle around her, a quiet domestic reality that stands in stark contrast to the chaotic, scary fiction she just sold to the world. In the weeks that followed, the landscape of the company changed completely. Her return didn't just add a character to the roster, it altered the physics of the show. Every match she was in felt less like a competition and more like a survival situation for her opponent. The announcers spoke in hushed tones during her segments. The lighting crew kept the arena dimmer when she was around. She became a black hole, bending the narrative gravity toward her. Other wrestlers had to adapt. The brave babyfaces couldn't just cut courageous promos anymore. They had to show fear, had to sell the idea that they were stepping into the ring with something supernatural. This is the mark of a truly successful, scary comeback. It forces everyone else to elevate their acting. You can't be a generic athlete when you are fighting a nightmare. You have to be a survivor. The storylines became deeper, more psychological. The feuds weren't about titles anymore. They were about the preservation of the soul. She forced the entire product to mature, to embrace a darker, more cinematic style of storytelling. The fans stopped chanting catchy slogans. Instead, they watched with bated breath, waiting for the sudden snap of violence. She controlled the pacing of the entire show. Even when she wasn't on screen, her presence was felt. The commentators would reference her looming threat. The champions looked over their shoulders. She had achieved the ultimate goal of a wrestler. She had become inevitable. The fear she instilled was the fuel that kept the engine running, proving that in a world of colorful superheroes, the monster is often the most important character on the stage. So, we look back at that night. It's the fog, the pyro, the silence. We call it the scariest comeback of the year because of the aesthetics. But here's the twist. The realization that adds depth to the spectacle. The fear didn't come from the makeup. It didn't come from the music or the darkness. The true terror, the reason this moment stuck in our throats, was that for the first time in years, she wasn't performing. The scary part was the clarity. When she walked down that ramp, she wasn't playing a character of a monster. She was revealing the exhaustion and the rage of a woman who had spent her career smiling for others. Following the script, being the good soldier, the twist is that the monster wasn't a mask she put on. The monster was the person she had been suppressed into becoming. The scariest comeback wasn't about a villain invading the show. It was about the death of a lie. We were scared because we recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look of someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. And in a world where everyone is trying to protect their spot, their image, and their paycheck, a person with nothing to lose is the most terrifying thing on earth. She didn't come back to win a belt. She came back to burn down the expectations that had held her captive. And as we watched her stand in that ring, surrounded by smoke, we realized the fire wasn't a special effect. It was her.